Welcome to Gentle Calm. You keep trying to strengthen your life. You refine your habits. You adjust your schedule. You rethink your goals. You reorganize your priorities. You look for better systems, clearer plans, more efficient structures. You're not careless. You are not lazy. In fact, you're likely thoughtful and intentional. And yet, despite all of that effort, something still feels unstable. There is a subtle shakiness beneath the surface, a sense that everything requires constant adjustment, a feeling that your life is being managed but not grounded. The reason may not be what you think. You are trying to reinforce the structure of your life, but you have not clearly defined what it rests on. You are strengthening walls without deciding on a foundation. You are adding weight without anchoring it. And when the base is undefined, everything built above it feels provisional. Most people are very good at setting targets. They can describe what they want to accomplish this year, what they want to improve this month, what they want to fix this week. Very few people can clearly articulate what in their life does not move. Not what they are working toward, not what they are experimenting with, not what they are optimizing. What is fixed? What remains steady when motivation drops, when circumstances shift, when pressure increases, when convenience tempts you in another direction? If nothing in your life is fixed, then everything is negotiable. And when everything is negotiable, your identity becomes negotiable. Negotiable identities feel fragile. You may look disciplined from the outside. You may appear organized, driven, capable. But internally, you are constantly recalibrating. You reconsider priorities depending on the week. You adjust standards depending on your energy. You bend commitments when they become inconvenient. You adapt your direction based on external feedback. Adaptability is a strength. But adaptability without a center creates diffusion. When there is no defined core, your energy disperses instead of consolidates. That dispersion is not dramatic. It does not always show up as anxiety. It shows up as a subtle instability, a background sense that nothing is entirely settled. A core is not a list of ambitions. It is not a collection of goals. It is not a productivity system. A core is a small number of operating principles that define who you are choosing to be, regardless of circumstance. It is a hierarchy of values that decides for you when emotions are loud and options are many. It is a set of standards that remain intact when pressure increases. Without that, every decision becomes situational. And situational living is mentally expensive. When you wake up each day without clear internal anchors, you renegotiate who you are over and over again. You decide whether this week you are serious about your health. You decide whether today you protect your time. You decide whether this month your boundaries matter. You decide whether this project truly aligns with what you value. Every renegotiation consumes energy. Energy that could have been used to build depth. When you define a core, many of those decisions disappear. You no longer ask, should I protect my evenings? If restoration is a non-negotiable value. You no longer debate whether to honor a commitment if follow-through is foundational to your identity. You no longer fluctuate between extremes if moderation is part of who you have chosen to be. This is not rigidity, it is clarity. Clarity reduces friction. Friction reduction is not about convenience, it is about alignment. When your behavior consistently reflects your stated values, you feel integrated. When your behavior shifts depending on context, you feel fragmented. Fragmentation creates internal tension. Integration creates steadiness. Right now, you may have goals that change every few months. You may have routines that rotate based on new insights. You may have aspirations that evolve as you learn. There is nothing inherently wrong with that. The problem arises when nothing underneath those goals and routines remains constant. Targets change. That is natural. Principles endure. Targets are responsive to circumstances. Principles shape your response to them. If your identity is target-based, then when the target shifts, your sense of self shifts with it. If your identity is principle-based, then you can adjust your goals without destabilizing who you are. That is durability. Durability does not look impressive from the outside. It looks steady. It looks like someone who does not dramatically reinvent themselves every season. It looks like someone whose standards do not collapse when pressure rises. It looks like someone who knows what matters more than convenience. Without durability, even success feels unstable. You can achieve visible progress and still feel internally unsettled because your foundation is undefined. It is possible to build upward very quickly while feeling unsure of what you stand on. Imagine constructing a building on soil that shifts slightly every week. You can keep adding floors, you can reinforce beams, you can upgrade materials. But if the ground itself is unstable, every addition increases the risk of collapse. The solution is not more additions. It is reinforcement beneath the surface. That reinforcement is rarely glamorous. It involves asking uncomfortable questions. What matters more than my ambition? What standards do I refuse to lower even when I am tired? What commitments remain intact when no one is watching? What behavior defines me even when it is inconvenient? If you can answer those clearly, then your life is likely operating without a defined center. And without a center, expansion becomes overwhelming. Work expands endlessly, expectations escalate, self-criticism intensifies. Because there is no boundary established by principle. When you establish a core, you also establish limits. Limits are not restrictive, they are defining. When you define what outranks productivity, you prevent productivity from consuming everything. When you define what outranks convenience, you prevent convenience from dictating your choices. When you define what outranks external validation, you prevent validation from steering your direction. Without those hierarchies, every force in your environment pulls equally, and equal pulling creates tension. A core simplifies decision-making. It does not eliminate difficulty. It reduces internal debate. You no longer ask, what feels best right now? You ask, does this align with what I have decided matters most? Alignment is far less draining than constant evaluation. Evaluation keeps you mentally active. Alignment allows you to act with less friction. Many people believe they need more discipline. In reality, they need fewer renegotiations. Discipline without principles feels harsh. Principles without discipline feel abstract. But when the two combine, your life begins to feel coherent. Coherence feels calm. Not because everything is easy, but because everything makes sense within a framework you trust. You do not need 20 values. You need a handful that genuinely shape behavior. You do not need to overhaul your entire life. You need to identify what does not move. Perhaps that means deciding that your physical well-being is not optional, regardless of workload. Perhaps it means deciding that one relationship will always receive protected attention. Perhaps it means deciding that your integrity in communication matters more than short-term comfort. The specifics are yours to define. But until you define them, your life will remain responsive to pressure rather than guided by principle. Responsive living feels reactive. Guided living feels intentional. There is a difference between flexibility and drift. Flexibility operates from a stable center. Drift occurs when there is none. If you are constantly adjusting your identity, your standards, your direction, then you are not strengthening your life. You are stretching it. And stretching without anchoring produces strain. You keep trying to reinforce your habits, your plans, your performance. But without a core, all of it remains provisional. If you take one idea from this, let it be this. Before you add anything else to your life, Decide what it stands on. Choose what does not move. Write it down. Return to it when decisions feel noisy. Let your behavior orbit that center. You will notice something subtle but powerful. When you stop renegotiating who you are, your internal tension decreases. Not because circumstances improve, but because you are no longer arguing with yourself. That quiet is not complacency. It is solidity. And solidity allows you to grow without feeling fragile. If this resonates with you, and you want to build a life that feels internally firm rather than externally impressive, subscribe. This channel is built around clarity that lasts, not intensity that spikes. If this gave you something to think about, take a moment to like the video. That small signal helps this kind of grounded conversation reach others who are tired of constant reinvention. If you want to go deeper, the Gentle Calm series walks through this progression step by step, from calming mental noise to building internal order to developing durable personal structure. The Gentle Calm Daily Reset Journal offers a practical way to reinforce consistency in your daily life. And on Substack, I write weekly reflections that expand these ideas in a slower, more personal format. You do not need to become someone new. You need to decide who you are and build from there. Thank you for being here, and stay calm.